Hi, my name is Catherine Dodge, and I'm a technical program manager working with the Inspector team. Today I'm going to be talking about Amazon Inspector and how you can automate the SEC in your DevSecOps lifecycle. A brief overview first about what we'll be covering. So today we'll talk through Amazon Inspector, give you an overview of the service, and then we'll run through a number of demos. The first will show you how you can assess your whole fleet quickly. The next, how you can tailor Inspector to your workflow. And finally, some resources that we have about how you can scale your vulnerability assessments in the cloud. So a quick note about myself. Most of my background has been in the incident response space prior to joining AWS. But once I joined AWS, I was really excited about the ability to make an impact, as when we roll out security services and tools, they have the ability to impact all of our customers who are running on our platform. And really key to how we think about and talk about security on the AWS platform is the shared security model. So you can see from this diagram that the way we think about it is as two pieces. The lower piece, which is the AWS piece of the responsibility, is what we refer to as the security of the cloud. And in this diagram you can see AWS is responsible for those orange lower layers, the physical infrastructure, networking components, all the software that we own and maintain to make our services available to our customers. The customer responsibility is for security in the cloud. Customers are responsible for patching their guest operating systems, applications, all of the pieces that they're using to run their workloads. That's what we refer to as security in the cloud. I mention all this because this is what led us to launch Inspector. Increasingly, customers were asking us to complement this shared security model. They really wanted us to help manage their portion of that shared security model. They were finding that their existing vulnerability tools were hard to adapt to usage in the cloud, and customers were looking for more cloud-native solutions. The other piece that we heard from customers was that they really wanted to be able to automate any kind of vulnerability assessment solution. And this is something that we've baked into Inspector from its inception. And finally, what we heard from customers was that they were really looking to AWS to provide prescriptive guidance on how to run and manage their EC2 instances securely. This feedback is what directly led to the development of Amazon Inspector, which is a security service that identifies vulnerabilities in your EC2 workloads. And the goal really is to be able to answer the question, am I secure? The goal isn't to make everybody a security expert and to have to understand all the intricacies. The goal is to give you the tools so that you can get the answers to these questions quickly. As cloud has become the new normal for more and more companies, they want their vulnerability assessment tooling to work with them in the cloud. So what are the key features that we've baked in based on these conversations with customers? The first is that we've tried to make it incredibly easy to get started. I'll be demoing today how you can get started running assessments across your entire fleet in AWS. This simplicity is not only about getting started, but the multiple operating systems that we support, so both Windows and Linux, and the degree to which you can automate all of this. The next key aspect of Amazon Inspector is that it's a pay-as-you-go model. So there's nothing up front, no upfront commitment, no upfront costs. You pay per assessment that you run. The pricing starts at 30 cents per instance per assessment, and the cost goes down to as low as 5 cents per instance assessment once you're running a large volume of assessments. And the third piece that our customers really ask for and that we're providing is the ease to integrate Inspector with your DevOps process. You can put it into all of your environments wherever you need to be running vulnerability assessment. So whether that's in your DevOps lifecycle or that's out in your production fleet, you can build Amazon Inspector support into your CloudFormation templates and deploy it anywhere you need it. So a few key concepts that'll be useful before we dive into the demos. The first is the notion of an assessment template. So this is defines the what and the when of when you're running these assessments. So it's all the configuration knobs of how you want to run your vulnerability assessment. The next piece is the assessment target. So this is defining which hosts you want to run this assessment against. The next piece is the rules packages. So these are the types of checks that you actually want to run. So what security vulnerabilities or exposures do I want to be checking for? The next piece is the inspector agent. To gather the data from all of your EC2 instances to analyze and determine what vulnerabilities they have, we deploy an agent to those hosts to gather that data. The next concept is triggers and runs. And what I mean by this is Inspector can be set up on a reoccurring schedule, so you don't have to think about running your vulnerability assessment. It can be run on a schedule for you. And finally, out of this, we produce our findings and reports. And this is what helps you identify any risks that you may have in your infrastructure so that you can go ahead and address them. So with these key concepts, the one other piece that I'll mention briefly before we get into our demos are the inspector rules packages. And again, these define what types of checks you want to be running against your infrastructure. I won't be going into a lot of detail on these. We have a lot of great documentation out on our website that goes into the details of what each of these checks and covers. But one thing I will say is that we have a nice mapping between some of those questions that we raised earlier and each of these rule sets. So for instance, if you're really concerned about which instances may be exposed to some of the latest vulnerabilities, then you'll want to run our common vulnerabilities and exposures, our CVE rules package, to detect that. And that's the one that we'll be using today in our demo. Similarly, things like the CIS benchmark will check for things like on-instance hardening of your host. So have you configured the host in accordance with the Center for Internet Security benchmarks for host best practices? And really the goal here with what we're providing with Inspector is we want to make it very easy, but at the same time customizable. So what you get is a vulnerability assessment tool that on the one hand is simple to get started with, but gives you all the knobs and dials that you need for more advanced use cases. So as this picture suggests, a great way to think about it is that Inspector provides you with a lot of knobs and dials that you can tune and tweak for your specific use cases. So with this Amazon Inspector 101 behind us, let's dive into the demos and see how you can get up and running with Inspector in a matter of minutes. Here, I'm logged in to my EC2 console. And I'd encourage you to go ahead and follow along if you are interested in getting up and running with Inspector. I'm going to start from scratch here, launching an instance and starting from 0. Briefly, what we're going to do in this demo is go ahead and run a vulnerability assessment against all of our instances in our account. And I'll show you how easy it is to do without having to provide any configuration information. Next, we'll see how simple the scheduling is and how the agent installation can be managed via Systems Manager. So for those of you who may not be familiar, Systems Manager is an AWS service that provides a way for you to manage your fleet at scale. One of the features of Systems Manager is the run command. This enables you to run commands on your hosts using the run command APIs without having to log in using SSH or manage SSH keys. So to get started, let's go ahead and launch an instance. You can go ahead and go to the EC2 console and click on Launch Instance. Today, we'll be using the Linux AMI to run our assessment against. We can use a basic T2 micro to run against. And the key piece that we need to do to make sure we can use Systems Manager to install the inspector agent is to ensure we attach the correct an IAM role to the instance that allows for SSM access. So here you can see I've already created a role called Role for SSM, and I've attached to that the policy that allows SSM to run command and install the inspector agent. And I click Next, and I'm going to go ahead and just add one tag. And I'm going to call this my dev box. So I've got a key stage, and the value for this instance is going to be dev. I'll go ahead and click through, review and launch my instance. So I get a notification that my instance is now launching. So let's flip over to the inspector console, and we can take a look at setting up our assessment. So as you can see, I've already run a number of assessments here in Inspector. The console shows you your important findings, some recent findings, and a breakdown of any recent assessments that you've run. So to get started, we can go to Assessment Targets and go ahead and create. And this first assessment that we create, we want to run it against our full fleet. So let's just call it full fleet. And we're provided with this checkbox that lets us include all of our EC2 instances. We'll see later that we have some knobs and dials we can tweak. But for getting started, we can just go ahead and run against all our EC2 instances. And in order to install the agent, if we leave this checkbox checked, it'll go ahead and use the Systems Manager agent, the run command feature, to install the inspector agent. That's it. Check those two boxes, and that'll get our new instance configured as part of this assessment. And one of the nice things that you can do is once you've got that configured, you can go ahead and click on Preview Target, and that'll make sure, that'll show you whatever instances are going to be part of this assessment. And in my case, you can see I've got a number of other instances also in this account. But if you've just started the one instance, you should just have the one instance showing up. And let's go ahead and flip down to our assessment template. So now that we've defined which instances we want to run against, everything, let's really quickly figure out how often we want to run that. So by default, I'm just going to choose that we're going to run it weekly. So against all of our instances, weekly. I select that target that we had created up above. And let's go ahead and just select the CVE rules package. We can select the duration of our assessment. I'm just going to have it run for 15 minutes, which is more than enough time for my instances. And we're going to leave out any configuration of these other items for now. In order to set up this weekly schedule, all we need to do is leave this box checked. It's going to go ahead and set up an event, a CloudWatch event, that will trigger an assessment once every 7 days. When we click Create, it's going to go ahead and create that event and start running. And that's it. We're done. So we've now just enabled across all of our instances the ability to install the inspector agent on my hosts that have the SSM agent, and the ability to then run that assessment on a reoccurring schedule once a week. And the really nice thing about having a cloud-native vulnerability assessment solution is that you can see, to run against all of my instances, I didn't have to supply host names, I didn't have to supply IP addresses, I didn't have to do all of the typical configuration that you might have to do with a traditional on-prem vulnerability assessment tool. So now that we're up and running with our first assessment, many of our customers then want to start configuring things, and that's a natural progression. So it's very quick and easy to get up and running. And what we commonly see with our customers is then, so now what? Now we've got our assessments running, we've got our agents installed, we're doing our assessments weekly. So now we can go ahead and really tune the workflow to our use cases. So I'm just going to highlight some of the common patterns that we've seen when looking at tailoring workflows. So a couple of the different things that you can do here, tuning which instances we're running against, configuring a slightly different schedule, and then we can do some fun things like connect up a Lambda function, an SNS queue, SNS topic to those notifications so that we can customize our workflow. And I have an example here of sending some high severity findings over to Chime, which is our Amazon chat and workflow tool. So for the second demo, we're going to go ahead and create a few custom targets that look at our dev and prod workflows separately. For the first one, we're going to call it Demo Dev Fleet. And instead of including all EC2 instances, this time we're going to identify the instances that we want to include in the assessment based on a tag value. So let's go ahead and select that stage tag for the instance we created earlier. And we're going to select only the instances that are tagged as belonging to the dev stage. This will ensure those are the only instances that are part of this assessment. Go ahead and save that. And then we can create a second target that's going to run against our prod instances. So again, we use these tag values to identify which instances we run against. Go ahead and save that. And now we can create some corresponding templates that are custom to our workflow that we want to have for our dev and our production fleets. So for our dev fleet, I'm going to create a template. And we can imagine that this might be called from your build system that is part of a continuous integration setup. So we'll go ahead, we want to run an assessment against our dev fleet. And in this case, we're going to go ahead and use a rules package that's a bit more tailored towards identifying issues while you're still doing development, the runtime behavior analysis package. You can read up in the documentation how we identify any insecure ports and protocols in use doing analysis while your application is running. So we'll go ahead and set that up. And we'll also have an SNS topic that we're going to push any findings to. So I've already created an SNS topic called Demo Dev CI, and we'll select that to push findings to. And in this case, we probably don't necessarily care about when the run started, when it finished. We're just going to go ahead and have it run from the CI workflow. So in this case, we don't necessarily want to set up a triggered schedule on a reoccurring basis. The expectation here is that you would trigger this from a workflow you had in your build system. So we don't need the reoccurring schedule. And we're just going to push any findings that we get to this SNS topic. We'll go ahead and create that. Let's also create a template that's dedicated to our prod instances. In this case, we'll tie it back to the target that we created earlier. And we're going to go ahead and run the CVE package against our prod fleet. And in this case, let's go ahead and set up two different SNS topics to notify. So in this case, we want to make sure that we notify one queue whenever we have a run started or a run finished or the state changes. Effectively, anytime there's transitions, what's happening with the assessment. And let's also then go ahead and set up the delivery of the findings themselves. So we want those reported to a separate queue. So what we've heard from customers is that findings in their prod fleet, they want to report to whoever's running ops, whoever's on call for their systems. And they want them to have those notifications as soon as possible. We'll go ahead and create that. And now that we've set up those templates, what we can do is go look at those SNS topics, and we can go ahead and configure those SNS topics to send notifications to whomever we need to. So in the case of our findings, it's straightforward to go ahead and subscribe your dev alias to that topic to receive notifications. And the other configuration tweak that you may want to do has to do with your CloudWatch events. So as I mentioned, anytime you create a scheduled inspector assessment, that's creating a CloudWatch event for you. And one of the nice features is that by default, Inspector creates an event that's going to run weekly, so once every 7 days. But a nice feature is that you can go ahead and edit that, tweak it to whatever is going to suit you. So for example, if I want to run a schedule of, let's say, 5 minutes past the hour, not past every hour, let's run it, how about at 2 a.m.? At 2 a.m., 5 minutes past every hour, let's say every Thursday. Then we can go ahead and set that up in CloudWatch, save it, and it even tells us when the next 10 trigger dates will happen. Go ahead and update, and we're all set. So the last bit I want to show you, and it's in a Lambda function that I have, is configuring notification out to Chime. So I have a Lambda function set up, and it's a bit of a tweak on an existing Lambda function that we've published. There's an existing blog post. I've noted it here in the slides, so if you want to visit it, you certainly can, and follow the instructions there. And so what I've done is just go ahead and tweak the existing code that what it does today is it listens on an SNS topic for any inspector findings. And for any findings that it sees, it can subscribe an email address to receive those notifications. Or the other thing it does is it will parse out the details of the findings and then forward those to any person who's subscribed to that to the SNS topic that it gets forwarded to. So you can go and look at this yourself, but just kind of a bit to highlight is, so here's where we're effectively pulling out the details of the finding that we received. So in this case, we're going to pull out the title, the description, and any recommendation that we received. And once we have that, we're going to go ahead and push it out to this notification topic, an SNS topic. And then all I've done down here is add a little snippet of code to go ahead and also push that to Chime. So you could tweak this if you wanted to see only high severities getting pushed over to Chime, you could go ahead and do that. So Chime supports this notion of webhooks, which makes it very easy to go ahead and forward those from something like a Lambda into your Chime rooms. And once you have the hook from inspector to SNS to Chime set up, you can receive alerts like this one. And finally, the last bit that I wanted to go ahead and demo is we've just released a really nice solution that talks about how you can use both Amazon Inspector and AWS Systems Manager to help you manage vulnerability assessment and patching at scale. We refer to it as our server fleet management solution. Let me show you in a quick demo some of the things that it gets you. So when you run the template that comes with that solution, they'll go ahead and set up Amazon Inspector targets and templates for you. And it sets up scheduled assessment runs. The ones that have been set up are under this sample fleet title. And you can see it's already set up some SNS topics to notify when assessments are run and then completed. What happens once those findings are pushed to those SNS notifications is that the templates include Lambda functions that then push those findings back over to the AWS Systems Manager inventory feature. So in the Systems Manager console, if you go down to the inventory section, you can run the template provided with that solution. And you'll see it'll go ahead and populate. Let's select an instance. And let's go ahead and look at its inventory. And what it'll go ahead and do is populate this custom field with any and all inspector findings. And that makes it very easy for you to go over here and see any findings that you have for any instances in your fleet. And as part of that solution, it deploys a test network, runs the inspector assessment, and then goes ahead and lets you specify your patch thresholds and define any patching schedules that you want to use with the Systems Manager. So I highly recommend that if you're interested in how you can go ahead and scale using Inspector, you check this out. One of the nice features that it comes with is a CloudFormation template that specifies how all of these pieces can be set up automatically. And so when you're doing vulnerability assessment at scale, what you can do is go ahead and have a template, have a CloudFormation template that includes your Amazon Inspector assessments, how you want to define things, and how you want dev teams to be running at scale. You can go ahead and share that template, share out the pieces that you want them to include, and the benefit is that you get is that then when your application goes live, you're also going live with your vulnerability assessments as well. So I'm not going to read through the entire template here, but needless to say, I've got the link here that has a download link for that template and shows you the CloudFormation templates that you can use to build this into your pipeline. So that when you launch your applications, you're launching also your vulnerability assessment. So just as a quick recap, we've shown you how Inspector scales as you grow. So the nice thing is it's very easy to get started. You can get up and running doing weekly assessments across all of your fleet in just a few minutes. In the second demo, we showed how you can really tailor your workflow to your specific use cases. So if you want to separate how you're doing assessments from your dev fleet to your prod fleet, you can do that. And we give you the knobs and dials in Inspector to be able to do so. And finally, we give you the building blocks so that you can grow your usage and grow how you're scaling vulnerability assessment as you grow. So the nice feature there is you can grab those CloudFormation template pieces, you can share them across your enterprise or even across your small 2-3 person shop to make sure that everybody's doing vulnerability assessment. They're doing it the same way, and you have it baked into your infrastructure from the beginning. So a few quick notes on where Amazon Inspector is supported today. We're expanding this region coverage all of the time. So we just launched the AWS GovCloud on June 20th, and we're available in all the other regions that you see here. So I want to thank you for your time today and for walking through with us how Inspector can help you get started easily with vulnerability assessments and also grows with you as your program grows. Thanks.